Football season never ends. This is Intentional Grounding with your host, Pat Grothier, on Brookdale Student Radio, 90.5 The Night. Check it out.
Welcome, everybody, back to another week of Intentional Grounding here. Of course, always bringing you the best of the NFL. We'll start off here with a couple of things that I couldn't fit into this show that happened earlier this morning. Lex Hilliard, fullback of the New York Jets, is going to go on. He needs a shoulder surgery. He actually fractured his shoulder blade, so he will miss the entire season. The Jets are now hoping on that Tommy Bohannon, who is a rookie that they picked up in the 7th round from Wake Forest, will go in and keep impressing as he has in the preseason. Also, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have picked up another kicker, as they have the other week when they got Lawrence Tynes, a free agent who used to play for the Giants. Now they got Ryan Lindell, who played pretty much all of his career with the Buffalo Bills. Ever since I could remember actually pay attention to football and knowing all the players' names, Ryan Lindell has always been with the Bills. So why they let him go, they had another rookie who just came in who was doing pretty well in the preseason, connecting on all 5 of his attempts. So, we'll wish the best of luck to him over there. But we'll start, of course, as always, with 5 and Out, bringing you the top 5 NFL headlines of the week. First here, another update in the HGH testing. The league and the NFLPA are at an impasse right now on one issue. And this seems to be the only thing that's really holding this whole situation up. The Players Association needs to agree to keep Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, as the man who hears appeals on violations of the league performance-enhancing drug policy, except those involving positive tests. So to break that down a little bit further, so as of right now, Roger Goodell hears all appeals of violations of the policy. For example, violations of the law or finding of PED usage without drug tests, such as if you pay attention to baseball or if you've watched, ESPN, any kind of sports center in the last couple weeks, you've naturally heard about the biogenesis trial going on in baseball. So basically, he's going to hear any appeals that haven't been made due to a positive test. Any appeals that are made due to a positive drug test that came up positive for any performance-enhancing drug, HGH, or anything else they found, is heard by a third-party arbitrator. The Players Association wants any appeal at all heard by that third-party arbitrator and nothing heard by Roger Goodell. You always see constantly, going back to the lockout a couple years ago, constantly the NFLPA and Roger Goodell, the commissioner, are always going at it head-to-head. So this is really the last, I believe, and what a lot of people believe, this is the last thing that's really holding it up. Albert Breer the other day put out a series of tweets. I'll go through them here. He said, per a league source and in line with our report Monday, commish power over appeals that involve the law stands in the way of HGH testing now. Part of the league/NFLPA has players testing positive during the population study not being suspended but entered into the drug program. I'll talk about that a little bit on what they actually have agreed on so far. He also says what that means is that I'll talk about that. But he goes, last thing he said was, again, parties have been close for a few weeks. Procedural stuff is done. Unsurprisingly, commish power over appeals is final battleground. So what they have agreed upon already, which is surprising, seeing, the way that these two have this kind of bad blood for each other. This is the things they have agreed upon already. So the preseason threshold test that we talked about a couple weeks ago, which tested everybody in training camp, and it wasn't punishing anybody at that specific time. If you came up positive, they'll do something later on, but that whole test during the preseason was basically just to get a threshold of what a positive test would look like in the future when they start doing it in the regular season. So there's going to be random blood testing for HGH at the beginning of the season if they can get this done by in the next couple weeks. Each week, 40 random players are selected. I saw a division breakdown, but I couldn't find it again. I believe it's something like 5 players from every division, I believe it is. 8 divisions, 5 players. Yeah, so that would make sense. Players who tested positive during the threshold test. Now, this is where they talked about the drug treatment and everything. The players who did test positive during the threshold test study in the preseason will not be suspended, but they're going to move to the next step of suspensions, and they also will be put in a drug program. So basically, if you didn't test positive at all in the preseason, but 6 games down the road, they find you test positive, you're suspended for 4 games. The second offense is 8 games. The third offense is a whole season ban. So if you already tested positive during that preseason test study, you're already at the 8-game suspension. So you're 2 strikes and you're out. You're out for the whole season. So hopefully, I'm really hoping that they start to out some of these guys. You never want to see it in the sport that you love. I'm sure baseball fans hate to see these constant rumors and things coming true out of these star players coming out with steroid usage and how it's you can really see this is how they got good. You never want to see it in the game, but it's going to be great to see that these guys are going to get caught and everybody else is going to be on a nice, fair playing ground here. Next up, Von Miller's in the news again. His the appeal for a suspension a couple weeks ago, it didn't really work out the way he wanted it to. He will serve a 6-game suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy. The Pro Bowl linebacker said the, quote, suspension doesn't result from a positive test. The suspension is stemming from an incident this summer where Miller spilled a urine sample during a scheduled test at an off-season workout at the Broncos facility. So the sample that he did spill, I don't know if they got him to take another one or if they will recover that one, but it was found to be diluted, which is, of course, a possible attempt to guard a test that Miller knew would come back positive. So the appeal process had the two sides trying to agree on the length of the suspension. That was really the whole thing that was holding it up. And, of course, with these appeal processes, you don't hear much about it because they like to keep it very, very confidential. So that was what was well, you don't hear much right even now about exactly what the reason for the suspension was, but the smart money tells you that it was from that incident that happened in over training camp. So he actually the league wanted to suspend him for half of the season. They wanted to suspend him for 8 games. But because they were trying to figure out, he also did test positive in 2011 in his rookie year for marijuana. So I think another thing that was holding up was trying to decide if this was going to be a first or a second offense. Now, I believe this is his second offense, even though it wasn't 8 games, it was only 6. The appeal brought him down those 2 games. So best of my knowledge is that his next violation is going to result in an entire season ban because the substance abuse policy and the performance enhancing drugs policy have the same guidelines for suspension. 1 game, first offense is 4, second offense is 8 games, third offense is the whole season. So this is going to be a huge blow to the Broncos for these first 6 games of the season. Of course, open week 1, they do the kickoff. Kickoff, by the way, 15 days, guys. So you only have to suffer through 2 more Sundays of agony and pain without football. So 2 more Sundays, 15 more days, and we're at the beginning of the season. So week 1, of course, they're facing Baltimore. He's going to miss that game. Week 2 against the Giants. Week 3, home versus Oakland. Week 4 versus Philadelphia. Week 5 at Dallas, and then wrapping it up, the last game of his suspension is Week 6 versus Jacksonville. He will come back in Week 7 at Indianapolis. So this is, losing Elvis Dumerville over the offseason to the whole fax issue, now losing your other Pro Bowl linebacker, the 2 guys that anchored that defense. It's a huge, huge loss. The linebackers now, it's a veritable who's who is actually back there. You can name one of the guys and you're going to kind of turn your head and say, I never really heard of him before. So this is going to fall a lot on Peyton Manning, really bringing this offense very high-powered, kind of similar to how the Packers do with Aaron Rodgers, where their defense isn't stellar as it should be for a championship team, but the opposing offense just can't keep up with Aaron Rodgers scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. So Peyton's going to really have to step it up this year and kind of put the team on his back a little bit. The Dolphins-Texans game, I don't know if anybody had saw this. I'm sure you heard about everything coming out of it. They played in preseason week 2. They played the other day. The Texans won the game 24-17, but the game did have a few incidents that they're talking about more about what happened in the game than the actual game. So newly obtained tight end for the Dolphins, Dustin Keller, he suffered. It's the triple threat of knee injuries. He tore his ACL, his MCL, his PCL, and also dislocated his knee. So it was shredded. And I mean, the hit, when you saw it, it looked like, when I first saw it, I thought it could be, at least one of those, probably an ACL, because that's the one you usually see. Because he was hit by rookie safety DJ Swearinger of the Texans right on his knee with his helmet. I mean, he drove it right into his knee. Swearinger defended himself the day after, saying that he went low to avoid a fine by going too high, which is something he did a lot in college. So he's trying to, you can somewhat commend the guy for trying to change his play style and not, headhunting like he was in college, which is huge, that the league is trying to go against now, with all the fines and everything with it. But he's going two extremes. He's saying, I went low to avoid going too high. There's a huge piece of middle ground there that you can hit. You don't have to hit the head and you don't have to hit the knees. There's a whole bunch of body there that you can drive your shoulder into or put your helmet right into his chest and get the guy. So, Brian Hartline, I somewhat agreed with Brian Hartline, who's a veteran wide receiver of the Dolphins. He had strong criticism for the rookie, saying that his explanation was, quote, crap. He didn't agree with it at all. He thought the guy, it was total BS what he was trying to say, the excuse that he was trying to give. In the same game, Texans defensive end Antonio Allen he was being blocked by Miami's new offensive guard Richie Incognito, who they got during free agency, when he ripped off his helmet and then swung it at Incognito's face, coming very close to hitting him. He came out today, actually. He had an interview with a local television station in Houston saying that he was disappointed with himself for swinging the helmet and getting suspended. They did give him a 3-week suspension, which is going to carry through the next 2 weeks of preseason and into the 1-game regular season. So he said his plan is, like anybody who gets in this situation, is to appeal it because this gives you the opportunity to state your case, talk to the NFL, and give them an opportunity to hear what you have to say. So I can understand the appeal on that side of it, but if they take a regular season, the regular season game away from the guy, I'll be very disappointed in the NFL and the decision they made, because if that helmet would have connected with Richie Incognito, there's no way this guy would have ever stepped on the field again. And if he would, it would have been a shame for this to actually be accepted in the game by the commissioner. This has no place in football. He was using his helmet as a weapon, and those things are tough. If he would have cracked Richie Incognito across the face, it would have been devastating. I mean, he came out and he kind of showed a little bit of humility, and then in the next second, he went to the opposite side of it. He said, in general, I feel disappointed in myself that I was able to let him get to me in the way that he did. That frustrated me, when knowing that's his whole game. This is where he took the turn. That's what he bases his skill level off of, and I let him take me down a road that led me into that path. So, he's not taking all the blame off himself. He's still putting some of the blame on Richie Incognito, which I saw the play, but it's, you can get frustrated, but when you let your frustration get to you the emotions get to you that much, it really was ridiculous. So next up here, the first bit of news coming out of the whole Aaron Hernandez situation. You heard a couple weeks ago about his, I believe it was fiance, I think it was, she was being held in contempt, or she was being charged with something with getting rid of evidence in the case. But Massachusetts State Police found the gun used in a double homicide in 2012 that the former tight end is allegedly linked to. This is not related to the first-degree murder investigation that Hernandez is currently in jail awaiting, trial, and he's actually going to have a probable cause hearing tomorrow. So this is not related to the Odin Lloyd situation, the gun that they found. But it is also being widely reported that Lloyd, the man that Hernandez allegedly murdered back in June, could have possibly had knowledge of the double homicide that they just found the gun to. So the gun that they found was found in a 19-year-old girl's car who was a citizen she was born in Aaron Hernandez's hometown of Bristol. So it's a little uncertain right now if there's any connection between the two. But of course, when more updates come out about it, I'll keep everybody posted on it. But, the gun that was used in the Lloyd shooting still hasn't been found. But video surveillance, I don't know if you've seen the pictures. I saw them because the media had actually went to the court when the judge had put the word's escaping right now, when he held all of the evidence and everything into the court. They released the pictures, and you saw the video surveillance from inside of Hernandez's home showing him walking around with a handgun just hours after the shooting occurred. So it's just a matter of time before they maybe find this gun or what the whole deal is. But, we'll get away from all the bad side of everything. Every quarterback competition going on. You're getting closer to the regular season. You see teams starting to name their starters. So the Cleveland Browns first-year head coach Rob Chudzinski, I love that name, named Brandon Weeden the starter on Tuesday, a few days after stating the quarterback competition was still open. Presumably he was saying that as a way to keep pushing Weeden, but everybody knew the team knew, the fans knew, the organization knew, Jason Campbell, the backup quarterback, knew that Brandon Weeden was going to get the starting role. Because in 2 preseason wins, Weeden went 18 of 25 for 229 yards and 3 touchdowns. So this is the first time he's looking very comfortable in this offense. You know, like I said last week talking about Brandon Weeden, this was his bread and butter, working in the shotgun when he was in college. This is where he made his money. So being very comfortable in this Norv Turner offense, Norv being a very good offensive coordinator, not that great of a head coach as we saw in the Chargers, but he's back now, and who knows with the Browns this year. I think the AFC, the wild card spots are going to be a little bit tough. I don't know if they could. I don't think they're going to get in this year, but if they keep improving, and Brandon Weeden, everybody's making fun of the fact that he's 29 years old and it's only his second year in the league, but he's not 29 years old in a football sense of the word. He hasn't had that much experience in the game of getting hit every year since he was 20 years old to be in the same light as guys who are around the same age. So his body is still a little bit, it's not as beat up as most other 29-year-old quarterbacks in the NFL. The Eagles, Nick Foles is going to be carrying a clipboard again to start the season after Eagles quarterback veteran Michael Vick has been crowned the starting quarterback week 1 against the Redskins. The announcement came at a surprise where most thought new head coach Chip Kelly was just going to name the starter for the next preseason game. But he actually came out and said that, Vic's our guy. He's going to be there week 1. And, you kind of had to do it. I read a good article saying this is Vic's team. He had the turnovers last season, which, killed them very, very, put them in a 4-win season. If he can improve from that in this new offense, which he looks very good in as well, a couple quarterbacks that in this competition, a lot of them are in brand new offenses. So they're looking very comfortable in these offenses. We're going to see where it goes. As I said a few weeks ago, Buffalo, the other team, they will name their starter 10 days before the season opens, so we'll hear from that. The Jets are most likely going to give, in my opinion, I think they're going to give the shaky veteran Sanchez the start, unless Geno's ankle holds up. And they named him the starter of the Giants game this week against the Giants. So if his ankle can hold up and he can produce, it's going to depend on the last preseason game against the Eagles as well. I'm guessing since Sanchez started the first 2, as long as Geno's healthy, he's going to start the next 2. So we're going to see how it goes with that. Blaine Gabbert, the quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was also named the quarterback for the season over veteran newcomer Chad Henne. But he will remain on the sideline for the remainder of the preseason. He suffered a hairline fracture in his right thumb against the game against the Jets. So I was 5 and out there. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back. We got a fantasy draft special coming up. Like I said, I'm not doing it this year, but I will gladly help you guys out with fantasy. Also, we will be doing a couple of preseason games. I'm not going to go through the whole schedule like I did last week. I'll do a couple local games, the ones that I could actually watch. And we'll see you back in about 4 minutes.
Moody Music Production.
Go out to the club, fresh and dead looking fine. Ain't on the guest list, we at the back of the line. Waiting on bottle service, but my car's decline. But that'll change in due time. But now all I can do is grind.
Living the lavish life above an average price range.
Crank up on the beat.
Dutch master.
Started off in a Section 8 housing grove. A couple of dreams, notepads and pencils. A common interest in instrumentals. Keep a steady flow like a steady wind blows. Into the game on a steady money mindset. Low steady cash flow on a steady paycheck. Feeling like we on top, but we coming up. Crank put us on, MME we blowing up. Grew up in Brooklyn, home of the Jigger Man. Lucky enough to have a roof over my damn head. Moved to Jersey, flooded basement. Music was all I knew, I was in a better place then. Dreams of a big house and 9 cars. My life don't fit into 16 bars. This ain't a joke, this white boy is serious. I will never choke, period.
You gotta
shine through the rain. Almost to the come up, almost to the fame. Stick our feet in the door, hello to the game. Dreaming of the crowd, getting high, we got our name. Rapping at the garden, nice whip, finally things. Big shit popping, no clips, no bang. You a 3 representative, it's time for a change.
And thank you for joining us again here. This is, of course, Intentional Grounding with your host, Pat Grothier. And that song you just heard was my brother, John, goes by the name of Dutch Masta, M-A-S-T-A, not Master. He has a couple of, catch him on social networking. He's on Instagram and Twitter. It's Dutch_Masta, T-U-E. He's also on SoundCloud.com/Dutch_Masta, so definitely give him a listen. I put out a mixtape, so, give that a download and a listen. Much love to him and hope to see him succeed as well. So we'll get back into it here on Intentional Grounding. A lot of injuries. Seems like this is the offseason with the most amount of injuries that I've seen in a while. Victor Cruz, every week I feel like I'm doing an injury report. So we'll get into it again here. Victor Cruz of the Giants suffered a bruised heel in the 20-12 loss to the Colts on Sunday. Although walking around in a boot and on crutches at the Giants facility, Cruz and head coach Tom Coughlin are confident that he will play in the season opener. So, it's just a bruised heel. It was nothing, no kind of Liz Frank injury like everybody's always afraid of, no high ankle sprains that everybody's always afraid of. So they're coming off of this huge contract that he signed in the offseason. It shouldn't be an issue him playing in the season opener against Dallas. Also, another injury in that game, Giants center David Boss also suffered an injury with Cruz. Both happened on the opening drive. His injury seems to be a little bit more serious. It's actually a strain in his MCL, I believe. His status is week to week, so it's not something that it's a little bit more serious than Victor Cruz is just a bruised heel. Another one here is ESPN, just a couple injury updates as well. ESPN insider Adam Schefter reports that New England Patriots tight end Rob Gronkowski, who had multiple offseason surgeries, including back and forearm procedures, saying that starting in week one would be, quote, a huge stretch, and it is, quote, not realistic to see him on the field. And I agree, he had, I think it was the forearm maybe required 3 or 4 surgeries due to infection, the infection that came through with it. So, and then the back surgery, which is the most recent one, like I said a couple weeks ago, the back surgery is tough to come back from, especially such a physical guy like Gronkowski in a tight end role where he's going up and he's catching passes and he's getting brought down by linebackers or safeties. It's going to be tough, but this could also prove danger for the job of Tim Tebow. If the Patriots do decide to keep Gronkowski to put him on the final 53-man roster, which is what you go into the season with, Tebow's spot becomes very valuable because if they are confident that he will be back before Week 6, which basically if you've heard me ever talk about the physically unable to perform list, which is also commonly referred to as the PUP list, basically when you put somebody on the PUP list, they cannot play until after Week 6. So they're sidelined for at least the first 6 games. So if they are confident that Gronkowski will be back before Week 6, there's no reason to keep Tim Tebow on the roster, especially after this negative 1 yard performance he had the other night. So he's either got to find himself, a way to be useful, or he may find himself cut on a practice squad, because before the Patriots came along, surprising everybody, nobody had any real true interest in Tim Tebow. I actually had another update here during the break that I'll talk about during this. Texans head coach Gary Kubiak says he could count on running back Arian Foster to play in the opener. So he does believe he will play. The optimistic coach says the calf injury is healing, but injections in his back is what caused some soreness in his legs and his back. So they actually did, when I wrote this yesterday, he was still on the PUP list, and they actually did just take him off of the PUP list. So he will start the season. He won't, miss, presumably won't be missing any major amount of games. Another one here is rookie running back Le'Veon Bell of the Steelers left in the first quarter of the 24-13 loss to the Redskins with an injury to his right foot. And actually just saw something earlier. I had gotten an update from it as well, that said he would... I lost it. Okay, but I believe we're gonna hear something on exactly what the injury is on Saturday. I believe head coach Mike Tomlin did say. Another setback at running back for another team, this time with Jonathan Stewart of the Panthers. He will be missing his third straight preseason game due to having surgeries on both of his ankles. Head coach Ron Rivera isn't ruling out putting him on the PUP list as well, on the physically unable to perform list. So I'm going to see what happens with that. Maybe D'Angelo Williams for the first time in a while will be the main back there. Usually when you saw it, another guy, a guy that you wouldn't really like to pick up any of the Panthers running backs in fantasy football, because you never know who was getting the ball that week. They usually went with a 2 to 3 headed running attack. Another one here is rookie defensive tackle Sharif Floyd for the Minnesota Vikings. Had a minor procedure just to suppress some pain in his left knee. The late first-round pick isn't expected to miss any regular season time, but will sit out the remainder of the preseason. This one here is going to hurt the Jets, depending on how, if the recovery time is true. The outside linebacker Quentin Coples could miss 3 to 4 weeks with a hairline fracture in his ankle. Also suffered in the win against the Jaguars. So hoping that he comes back, because he's a very, very big part of this pass rush, along with Muhammad Wilkerson. So, really, really hoping that he can come back. Another new linebacker here for the Browns, Barkevious Mingo. Like I've said, anytime he's in the news for anything at all, I'm reporting on him because I love his name. He will undergo more tests on a bruised lung he suffered in an exhibition game last week, and this one's rough. The first-rounder's injury actually caused him to spit up blood on the sideline. So the Browns aren't taking any chances. He's getting a second opinion. He's undergoing more medical tests. Hopefully he'll be out there for him as well. Lastly, up here on injury report, the 49ers are running into another minor loss at wide receiver. With Mario Manningham, he will start the season on the physically unable to perform list, so he will be sidelined until at least week 6, like I said. Niners fans shouldn't be too worried, as Coach Harbaugh and the organization are pleased with his recovery. So, hopefully they're hoping that he will be back in, regular, ready-to-go football condition by week 7. Also an update, he also did give an update on Michael Crabtree, the wide receiver who went down with, I believe it was a torn ACL or something with his Achilles tendon early in the offseason. He will be placed on the physically unable to perform list as well, but he has hit, quote, every single goal as far as his timeline. So they are putting him on the PUP list. They're not putting him on the IR. So, of course, 49ers and most people are expecting the 49ers to make the playoffs again. They're hoping that maybe he could come back in a playoff game, whether they get far into it, enough for him to go back to it. We'll have to see as we go along. We had a couple preseason games this week that I wanted to, which doing some local ones, the ones around town. A couple of them, they weren't working for me. I couldn't load them up. Or actually the Pittsburgh game was blacked out in our area, so I couldn't watch that game either. But I'll start off here with the Giants versus the Colts. The Colts did win the game 20-12. I'll do the first team win again towards the end. David Wilson, the running back, he seemed like he's going to be the starter there. He did have a few nice runs when I was watching the game. You did see a little bit of Andre Brown. I think they're going to put him more of a power back kind of role. You're going to see the way that they had in the past few years when Brandon Jacobs, before he had his departure, when it was Ahmad Bradshaw taking majority of the carries, and then you had Brandon Jacobs going in for the powerhouse runs. I think they might run that same two-headed running attack again. The Giants just seem like, they can't catch a break at running back over these last couple years. They're constantly getting hurt. You have Ahmad Bradshaw, you have Brandon Jacobs, and you have these two guys getting hurt last year. So if they can stay healthy, the Giants, it's going to help them a lot make a run at stealing the division up from everybody else. They did struggle in the red zone, though. They had one turnover, which was a fourth down conversion that they missed, and one field goal. And both of those times, they got handed a golden opportunity. They were within the 10-yard line, and they just couldn't get it in the end zone. Reggie Wayne still playing at such a high level. If you saw that, the touchdown he got with the tip, that was amazing. And he had a nice one-handed catch on a screen as well, and he was looking great, being a 12-year veteran in the league, looking better than most of the young kids out now. Speaking of young kids on the other side of the ball, the Colts rookie T.Y. Hilton, he could be a very, very good receiver for them underneath Reggie Wayne. So I'll talk about him a little bit later. I think he's a bit of a sleeper when you're looking at fantasy football. Like I said, you had 3 red zone chokes by the Giants out of their first teamers. It's preseason, but it's inexcusable at this point. You're not showing everything, of course, that you would in the regular season, but if you get handed 3 red zone opportunities and you're only coming out with 3 points, I'm sure Tom Coughlin got into him about the guy who's a stickler for that kind of stuff. I gave the first team win to the Colts because they really did do very, very well in the game. Over to the Jets in the Jacksonville game. This one left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth for the first teamers. The Jets did wind up winning the game 37-13, but the first teamers were very, very, they didn't impress me one bit. Clyde Gates, one guy who you always see right off the bat, he is one of the kick returners. I think he does a couple punt returns here and there too. He's a nice little special teamer. He reminds me of Brad Smith, a guy we had a couple years ago, who I'm not sure where he's now. I know he went to the Bills. I think he is still there, actually. Geno Smith didn't suit up with the injury to his ankle, but like I said, he will be starting next week. We also had our first look at Chris Ivory, the free agent acquisition that the Jets got. And Sanchez, with the help of a penalty, he strung together a pretty decent touchdown drive for the first one. A long one got them down the field, and he had a nice little dump off to Cumberland to get in the end zone, a guy who's, he's kind of, as a young quarterback, Sanchez, when Dustin Keller was there, really relied on him a lot. So we're going to see how it goes with Cumberland, and also other tight end we have there is Kellen Winslow, who came in the offseason. So we're going to see how it goes with that. Maurice Jones-Drew also made his debut of the preseason, just absolutely tearing up the Jets defense, along with, Blaine Gabbert was picking them apart. Denard Robertson lining up at running back and at wide receiver. You had Justin Blackmon. They were running this hurry-up offense that the Jets are just, I don't know if you saw I tweeted about it. They're still showing that they are very, very weak against the hurry-up offense. This is something that still hasn't been improved on, and this game for the first teamers, it was dismal compared to the Lions game. But Bilal Powell did have a nice little run. He scurried for maybe, I think it was like 40, 50 yards. You still had Sanchez overthrowing easy passes. Short little screen. It was like 3rd and 2. They were inside the 10-yard line, 3rd and 2, and he overthrew Stephen Hill on a pass that I could make. And it was, so these little things are what angers everybody and gets everybody frustrated in saying that he hasn't changed and, what gives him the right to start. But the way that it's going, we'll see after the Giants game of how Geno Smith does, because, even before he got injured in the Lions game, like I said last week, he wasn't looking that great either. So, it's all going to see how the rest of the preseason goes out for them. Next game here is Philadelphia versus Carolina. Philly got the win 14-9. LaShawn McCoy made his first appearance of the preseason as well, another top running back. Nick Foles had the start. He put together a nice drive, but when he was trying to throw it away in the back of the end zone, a guy jumped up there and snatched it right down. But he made up for it a little bit on the next drive. He had strung together a very nice drive, and he ran it in to get the touchdown. On the other side of the ball, Cam Newton looked a little frazzled. He wasn't really producing that well. Nothing was really going right for him. The starters actually, you start to see in more in the second and the third, sometimes in the third preseason game, the starters will stay more into the game than just the first drive. So they stayed into the second quarter. Vic actually did come in the second quarter, and he had to put together a nice 2-minute drill with McCoy running in the touchdown on the 1-yard line. So I think Vic did going through the preseason and watching those games and seeing how he played in the new Chip Kelly offense, I think he did deserve that starting role. But the main thing is the turnovers. He's got to keep those under wraps and really, really hone it in and just bring the team back to what they were when he first started to come into the Eagles and brought them to the playoffs. So next one here is Buffalo versus Minnesota. Buffalo won the game 20-16. Now this was a tough one because I'm looking at it and I didn't think any of the first teams would win. Offensively, it was a pretty poor performance on both sides of the ball. Kevin Cobb got his first preseason start after he tweaked his knee when slipping on a wet mat at preseason practice. C.J. Spiller really started showing, what the Bills were missing out on when they had stashed him away and put Fred Jackson in the spotlight. His fantasy value is going up. Cobb was intercepted on a tip ball, so that one really wasn't fully his fault. But the game on both sides of the ball, it was 3 and outs, it was turnovers, it was you'd get one first down and then another 3 and out and then you'd punt it away. So it was very poor performance offensively. But when you started to get more into the second quarter, the Bills' defense and special teams, they were putting continuous pressure on Christian Ponder, the quarterback for the Vikings. The offense was just horrendous under Kevin Cobb. So it's really this is gonna set back Kevin Cobb huge because E.J. Manuel last week, and I didn't see much of E.J. Manuel in that preseason game. I'd stopped watching it, but they had said that he was doing great as well. So I said the first teamers that won was the Buffalo defense and special teams. Not the offense, but their defense and special teams did great. They scored they had a block punt, I believe, or a block kick. They had a couple forced fumbles. They getting constant pressure on Christian Ponder. So definitely a big thumbs up to them. All right, so that was all preseason. Like I said, I wanted to get to a couple more, but the preseason live from NFL wouldn't let me. One of the games was blacked out, and the Patriots game, it just kept freezing on me, wouldn't let me watch it. But we're going to come back. We're going to get to the main talk of today. Help you guys out in fantasy as best as I can with a fantasy draft special. I'll give you top 10s of all the positions. I'll give you some minor draft advice. I'm also going to give you some advice on some team names because that's always a tough one. You don't worry. More people are worrying about their team names than their draft now. So we're going to come back in about 3 minutes. All right, everybody, welcome back to your Intentional Grounding. We will get into our last segment. We're going to cut out team talk this week. We'll get back into it next week with, what division will we go to? We were with the East, so let's go to the West. We'll start with the NFC West next week. That division consists of the NFC West. I'm usually pretty good at this. NFC West is the 49ers, I'm mixing myself up. The 49ers, the St. Louis Rams, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks. So you got those 4 teams. We'll start off with the 49ers, everybody's favorite team of the offseason here. But we'll get into the fantasy draft special here. So fantasy football, in my opinion, and this is something I feel very strongly about, is fantasy football is 20% common sense, 10% football knowledge. And it can even be less than, you can put that at 5%, and 70% luck, probably more, because I've seen some people win leagues and go 12-4 in the regular season with little to no football knowledge. So mostly it's common sense in who you're going to draft, best available at that time, who you might need, bye weeks, how they mash up and things like that. The football knowledge is very little because, whoever you use, ESPN, CBS, or Yahoo, they all list the top players there. So you can't really go wrong with it. And like I said, it's mostly luck. So, guys like Matthew Berry, who are getting paid to write books and do fantasy draft specials on ESPN and put out all these magazines and everything, they're BSing you most of the time, in my opinion, because it's all such luck. But we'll get into it, running backs. Again, last year when I did play, like I said, I'm not doing it this year. Sorry to let everybody down, family and friends, but I said I wouldn't last year. I went, speaking of, with my, I guess you could say, credibility with fantasy, last year I went all out with it. When an old supervisor I had at work, we split a RotoWire subscription, which gives you all rankings, updated injury reports. Not supposed to endorse anything on the public radio, but RotoWire is definitely a website to look at if you're in a bit of a bind. Definitely the rankings help out a lot when you're doing drafts because you can, they are very advanced with, seeing some players that you might not even think of, and giving good explanations and good projections on why they might do pretty well. I went all out with fan. I was in 3 leagues last year. I did draft at two leagues. So we'll get running backs, again, very shallow, just like they were last year. Once you get out of the first round, you're going to find yourself struggling to add some depth. So get them early and often. Definitely, because you're going to see guys like, in my top 10 that were the difference maker for some people in some weeks who might have had a little bit less on a wide receiver or quarterback kind of basis. So top 10 here, number 1, of course, Adrian Peterson. Guy put up close to 2,000 yards last year. Number 2, this may surprise some people, I put Dougie Martin. I picked him up last year, and he did great, putting up 40, 50-plus games all the time. I love Doug Martin as a fantasy running back, and I think he's going to do just as good this year. 3rd, I put Arian Foster of the Texans. As long as he stays healthy, he, again, is going to be a solid running back. Ray Rice at number 4, always a good pickup in there. Number 5 is Jamal Charles, a guy from Kansas City who is, once he's another guy, if he's healthy, he is on point, and he's getting you a lot of points. Number 6, I put Marshawn Lynch of the Seattle Seahawks. Number 7, I put up C.J. Spiller, a guy, like I said, his fantasy value is going up and up. Every week, that every time this guy puts a cleat on the field, his fantasy value is going up. I think the only person who had more yards per carry than him was Adrian Peterson, unless I think he might have had more. I think at one point in last season, he was at 6 yards per carry. So he's a guy who's going to produce a lot of yards and have those big breakout plays. Number 8, I had him last year as well, Trent Richardson of the Cleveland Browns, another guy who's had some health issues. Number 9, a guy I'm very high on, is Alfred Morris of the Washington Redskins, putting up 1,600 yards in his rookie season last year, splitting a lot of carries with RG3. So RG3 not going to be taking as much, in my opinion. I think they might have said this. They will be kind of taking his role back in the running game a little bit. Alfred Morris could see a pretty good jump in carries. And I rounded off the top 10 with LaShawn McCoy of the Philadelphia Eagles. A couple guys that, one guy that, when you say the name and you say sleeper next to him, it doesn't kind of make sense, but a guy like Maurice Jones-Drew is a guy who a lot of people may wind up staying away from because of the injury last year, but when the guy's healthy, he's putting up 1,300 to 1,600 yard seasons. And on a team like the Jaguars, where they don't have a very strong quarterback, well, Blaine Gabbert is starting to be a little bit better, but they're mainly relying on the back of Maurice Jones-Drew. As you can see last year, when he didn't play, they won 2 games. When he was playing, they were winning up to 7 and 8 games. A couple other sleepers here, Reggie Bush of the Detroit Lions. I think he should do quite well there. Darren Sproles of the Saints is always a guy who's, he's going to be catching passes out of the backfield, depending on if your league, how they score it, if they'll give him points for his special team work. He's very valuable in that. Danny Woodhead, who just recently is now with the San Diego Chargers. I believe somebody said that he's going to see about 50% of the running game over there. Ryan Matthews, a guy who I heard Matthew Berry, actually, turned it on the other night, made a joke about, Ryan Matthews, not joking, but Ryan Matthews had more broken collarbones than he's had touchdowns, and that's the truth. It's a sad truth, but that's the truth. So Danny Woodhead, a guy who could come out at the Chargers and do pretty well. He was always great with the Jets. It was sad to see him go, and he also did very well with the Patriots when he was there. Another guy, if you can pick him up late, he's good in your RB2 slot, or if you need to put him in the flex, the running back or wide receiver slot, is BenJarvus Green-Ellis of Cincinnati Bengals. Also, if you've been watching Hard Knocks, they show a lot of the rookie who came in, Giovanni Bernard. I think he's a guy who could be similar if you ever saw the way Matt Forte and Michael Bush ran in Chicago. You'd see Matt Forte get a lot of yards and only a couple touchdowns, and Michael Bush would come in and punch in those tough situation yards, and he was basically a touchdown stealer. So also watch with that in the first couple games, see how Giovanni Bernard's role comes into the Bengals. Quarterbacks, they can be very valuable depending on how your league scoring system is. Some default 4-point touchdowns of a quarterback, but most of the leagues I've ever played in, it's a 6-point touchdown, just like wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. So having an Aaron Rodgers meant, you could put up 40-plus games for you. very valuable to have a quarterback like that. Like I said, depending on how your league scores. I used to play with a guy who would pick Aaron Rodgers almost every year in the first round, and he'd usually do pretty well. Top 10 here for quarterbacks. Again, 1, Aaron Rodgers. He's always putting up a ton of yards and the touchdowns to boot. Number 2, Drew Brees, a guy who's very, very good. 3, Cam Newton is Cam Newton he's double-headed, so you'll have him passing for a decent amount of yards, but he's also running for a lot and also scoring those running touchdowns. So even if your league does score 4-point passing touchdowns, he's still hauling in 6-point running touchdowns. So another guy who's very valuable in certain fantasy leagues. Number 4, Peyton Manning. Like I said earlier, a lot of the responsibility of putting the team on his back is going to be, you're going to see that this season. So, as long as his line can keep him off his butt, then he's going to do pretty well. Tom Brady, I put him at number 5 in the New England Patriots. Again, some of these quarterbacks you shouldn't take too high. Even in it's hard to say exactly when, because it all depends on how your draft goes, but you could get away with taking them in the, depending on how long they stick around, in the 4th, 5th round maybe sometimes. I haven't done any mock drafts or anything because I'm not doing it, but, from what I've heard, it's not very prudent to take one very early. Number 6, I put Matt Ryan because he's you see his improvement every year. He was ranked top 5 in most categories last year as a quarterback. Number 7 is healthy Robert Griffin III, not hurt one. So as long as he's doing well coming out of the gate, he's very valuable as a fantasy quarterback. Number 8, Matt Stafford, a guy who put up a ridiculous amount of yards last year with Calvin Johnson. Not as many touchdowns, but the yards definitely made up for it. Number 9, a guy who I'm not too hot on, but he could 100% prove me wrong, and a lot of people hope that he does, is Colin Kaepernick. I put him at 9. And number 10, I tied him because Andrew Luck is a good quarterback, but Tony Romo is a guy who always does wind up putting up very, very good stats in the season, and that translates well into fantasy football. So I had Andrew Luck of the Colts and Tony Romo tied at the number 10 spot. A couple sleeper QBs. I had, another thing with fantasy is you shouldn't, unless you have a very good team and you don't need a whole lot of depth in your bench, where you have your bye weeks matched up very well. You can sometimes, maybe, I know some people do it all the time. I believe my dad does, always have 2 quarterbacks on your roster. I'm not a big fan of it. What I'll usually do is, when I see my quarterback's bye week, I'll see who's on the free agent wire that week. So a couple guys I picked up last year. Andy Dalton is one guy who did pretty well for me a couple games, and I think a guy who's going to come out and do great as a sleeper is Alex Smith. Now, whether you want to go very heavy in the first 7-8 rounds and pick up a quarterback late, a guy like Andy Dalton or Alex Smith could be around there. And like I said, if you have a 4-point touchdown league where one of those top 10 quarterbacks isn't going to be as valuable to you, why not pack your roster filled with running backs and wide receivers while you can, and pick up a guy like Alex Smith late, who's, I believe, is going to do very well, as he has been doing in the preseason. Wide receivers, they can pull off some huge games for you or leave you disappointed 4-point games, here and there. Having a split targets with 2 to 3 other guys and a tight end can leave them going hot and cold most of the time. If you were an owner of Julio Jones like I was last year, you saw it was lit. If you looked at Julio Jones and Roddy White's stats, Julio would be on one week, Roddy would be off. They'd swap every single week. So Julio would get 12 points and Roddy White would get 4 points. And then Roddy White would get 12 points next week and Julio Jones would get 5 points. So while having a wide receiver can be very valuable, I mean, if they are one of the few solid, consistent type wide receivers, if you have the opportunity, grab him. A guy like Calvin Johnson, who's the main wide receiver there, he's going to be putting up a lot of points, especially with a 2,000-yard season, only getting, I think it was around 4 or 5 touchdowns. Still putting up a lot of yards is going to help a lot. Number 2, A.J. Green, a guy who I'm very, very keen on. I had him last 2 years in a row, and he did nothing but good things for me. Julio Jones, another guy I praise a lot. Des Bryant of the Cowboys should do pretty well. Like I said, Romo is always putting up good stats, and Des Bryant being his number 1 should prosper from that. Number 5 is Brandon Marshall. Just his talent alone is going to put him up there. I'm not too hot on Jay Cutler, but Brandon Marshall is a freak athlete, and he's going to do good no matter what. Number 6 is a healthy Andre Johnson, because when he's on, he is on. But when he's got he pulls a hammy or something else is going wrong with him, he's sidelined for 4 weeks, and you're left, in the dark looking for somebody on the waiver wire to fill a spot. Number 7, Demaryius Thomas of the Broncos. I think he should do pretty well with Peyton Manning this season. You also have number 8. I put the other side of the Atlanta Falcons wide receiver core with Roddy White at number 8. Number 9, Vincent Jackson. I think that's all going to really depend on how the quarterback situation plays out in Tampa Bay, whether Josh Freeman does well and keeps his role, or whether he starts to go on a bit of the decline and the new guy comes in and steals a spot. Number 10, Larry Fitz, just because you can't ever count him out. The guy is one of the best receivers in the league, and who knows with Carson Palmer, he could come out of nowhere and he could have another season like he did with Kurt Warner. A couple sleeper wide receivers are T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts. Sidney Rice, I think, of the Seahawks. He's going pretty late because no Percy's going to be there for most of the time. And also Josh Gordon of the Cleveland Browns. We'll start moving a little faster here. We got 5 minutes left. Tight ends, I'm sorry. If you can sneak a solid one, he can make or break a season for you. Having a guy put up 10-plus point games is gold for squeaking out those tough, close matchups. So, you got guys like in your top 10, like I put number 1 here, Jimmy Graham, number 2, Tony Gonzalez, number 3, Jason Witten. They could put up some good points for you. Number 4, a guy, Kyle Rudolph, he kind of bounces back and forth between people's rosters and the waiver wires depending on bye weeks. But he did put up some good stats last year. 5, Owen Daniels of the Houston Texans. At number 6, Vernon Davis. A lot of people had him ranked a little bit higher. I think now he may be ranked a little bit higher, seeing that they're going to be lacking a little bit at the wide receiver position. Number 7, I had Antonio Gates out of San Diego because he's basically a wide receiver there. And with again, similar to the 49ers, they're taking huge hits at the receiver position. Number 8, Greg Olsen of I believe he's on the Panthers now. Number 9, Jermichael Finley of the Packers. And number 10, just because I got to put him in the top 10, is Gronkowski. Because when he is healthy, he is one of the most valuable players to have on your roster. A couple sleepers here. I put Jared Cook of the St. Louis Rams and Brent Selleck, believe it or not. I think he looked pretty good in the preseason with the Eagles there. Defense and special teams, they combine the two into one with fantasy, can be very valuable depending on your scoring. Another thing, it all depends on how your scoring system is. If it's giving high point values for touchdowns, picks, fumbles, points scored against them, you can see a defense putting up a lot of points for you, or on the flip side of that, sometimes going negative. So top 10 here, I put the Seahawks. 2 of the 49ers. Next is the Bears. Bears are a team who has a lot of turnovers into touchdowns. Number 4 is the Texans. 5, the Bengals. Wrapping up with the Patriots, the Steelers, Ravens, Packers, and I put the Broncos last. Now they're last because of all the hits they're taking with Von Miller, losing Doomerville, and not really filling the voids too well. A couple sleeper guys that you can pick up on a bye week are the Rams and the Cardinals. Surprisingly, they will do pretty well, actually. And also the Giants. You can never sleep on Tom Coughlin's Giants. Kickers, everybody's favorite running joke of your fantasy draft chat. Oh, dare me to take a kicker in the first round? Oh, you want me to pull an Al Davis and take Sebastian Janikowski in the first round? But hear me out on kickers. In the late rounds, when you're rounding out your roster with guys that are, 90% of them will get dropped and sit on your bench until then, and of that 10% that you keep that doesn't get dropped, maybe 2% will do well. And of that 2%, you may start the guy 0.1% of the time on the week that he does well. So why not get a guy like Steven Gostowski who's going to put up 10-plus point games for you? There's no reason not to. When you look at it with that logic, why are you going to pick up a guy like Percy Harvin, or who may not play this season, or Bryce Brown, a backup running back for the any backup running backs in that case, Ben Tate, Bryce Brown, any of those guys who get injured a lot, a backup would have a bit of a role. Why not get a guy like Steven Gostowski in the 10th round? Why not get a guy like Phil Dawson, who I rank second? They'll put up solid points for you every game. And if you're down by a couple points and it's Monday Night Football and all of his players are done and you got Steven Gostowski and he needs to just score one field goal, or he needs to put up 10 points like he usually does, that could win you the game, and you'll be thanking me later. Third, I put Blair Walsh from Minnesota. Number 4, Matt Bryant. And number 5, Matt Prater, wrapping it up with the Denver Broncos. So thank you again for joining us this week. We're just about out of time here. Next week, we'll report a little bit more on preseason games. We'll play it by ear, see exactly what's going on. And thank you again for joining us.
90.5 WBJB HD3 Lincroft, Middletown, Brookdale Student Radio, where you can be the DJ.